Hello everyone, this is my second Protestant bookshelf here. There was the last Reformed one, mostly Reformed stuff. And this one is a little bit more like non-denominational, eclectic, Protestant things. So over on the left here, I'm scooting up here, over on the left here I've kind of started off with more transitioning from like a Reformed, Anglican into the more eclectic kind of things. So right off the bat, I have N.T. Wright here. Now I have read Surprised by Hope. There were parts of it that I thought were good. This one is mostly about the afterlife and things like that. I think there's actually a section in it. Yeah. Yeah, this is the part that I always complain about. I do not, however, find in the New Testament or in the earliest Christian fathers any suggestion that those at present in heaven are actively engaged in praying for those of us in the present life. And when I was reading this book, I had just read about an early church account of Ignatius doing this exact thing. A vision, a group of Christians had a vision of Ignatius in heaven. Anyway, there's a lot of good in this book, but like stuff like this, a lot of people complain about N.T. Wright for because he has a bad habit of like having no citations for anything he says. Granted, this is a popular level work, but like, come on, dude, really? One thing that kind of rang true for me in this book, though, is that one of his theses is that the concept of purgatory is an analogy for the life that we're currently living right now. And I thought that was pretty interesting. I haven't read this one. This is another pop-level work, The Day the Revolution Began. Yeah, haven't read it. It's a long book, but I think it's a distillation about his whole concept of the atonement. Here we have a Davenant Institute book, Philosophy and the Christian. This is a reformed correction to some excesses of philosophy in the Reformed tradition, where, like, for example, there's a whole chapter on Cornelius Van Til and Karl Barth and like the rejection of natural law and natural theology, and it offers a more even-handed view of things that is more in the tradition of like C.S. Lewis, for example. But it's actually a great handbook if you're not if you don't know much about philosophy and Christian theology. Like at the beginning, it has a whole section on Aristotle's four causes and why they support that, why they believe that. So yeah, Davenant Institute is just really good for like a very even keel kind of Presbyterian Reformed thought, and it's very friendly to like the ACNA, Anglican stuff as well. The Christian Faith by Moss. Now this is an ancient book here. It's just a whole outline of the Anglican faith written by a clergy member. Granted, though, like there's a lot of traditionalist stuff in here, but you can actually very clearly see the beginnings of the very liberal tendencies in Anglicanism. For example, he's very much hesitant to endorse any like things that he might deem to be fables or things like this. So I don't know. It's an okay book. Surprised by Joy, C.S. Lewis. Have not read this one. Picked it up on the cheap at a used bookstore. Supposed to be pretty good. It's his spiritual autobiography. I've read a number of things from this, the complete signature classics. Mere Christianity, Screwtape Letters, Abolition of Man, Great Divorce, Problem of Pain, Miracles, and Grief Observed. It's a great collection. Looking back, I would probably rather get them as individual volumes because I'm not super interested in the Problem of Pain or Miracles, for example. I'd rather just kind of pick up some things as I'm interested. This is a brand new book for me that I just picked up. The Question of God, C.S. Lewis and Sigmund Freud debate God, love, sex, and the meaning of life. Particularly interesting, what I find about this book is that it talks a lot about the lives of these men in addition to their beliefs. Apparently, Freud was kind of a sexual conservative. He had very conservative views on it. So, like, contrary to popular belief, he kind of just wants to, like, call out the degenerates, from what it sounds like. Anyway, Freud is one of the popularizers of, like, the wish fulfillment idea of belief in God and things like that. Provocations, Spiritual Writings of Kierkegaard. This is a really, really good book. It's basically, I think it's edited by, what's his face? Who edited it? It's, Eugene Peterson. I think he might have put this together. Let's see. Oh no, it was Charles Moore. I guess Eugene Peterson just did a blurb about it or something. In any case, this is a really, really good book because it distills a lot of the main points that Kierkegaard was trying to make in his career. So you can see To Will One Thing, Truth and the Passion of Inwardness. I see it as kind of like what Peter Kraft did with Blaise Pascal's writings, where they kind of sort them, put them in a logical order, some of his most popular thoughts, and organize it in a logical progression. So yeah, if you're totally new to Kierkegaard and you just want to glean some practical spiritual insights that you can think about and meditate on, this is a really good kind of devotional style book on that. And it's from Kierkegaard's own writings, so it's not like stuff other people have written about him. This book is really, really interesting. It's pretty much an academic dissertation, though, from Paul to Valentinius by Peter Lampe. Christians at Rome in the first 2 centuries. It's not a page turner by any means, but I don't know if I actually put bookmarks in here or not. But as you get later on, like it basically paints a picture of early Christianity where Peter Lampe I think he's a Presbyterian, or at least an evangelical, and he's actually giving a glimpse into the everyday life of normal Christians in Rome. And it's really, really cool because it talks about like marriage and divorce and like the different classes of people that were in Rome at the time. And he also has a huge section on the episcopate and the clergy and how that authority structure worked. And the basic thesis that he's presenting is that the church organization started out as a group of elders, and eventually it was the communications person, the person that was in charge of writing letters and communicating, that kind of solidified the authority among the group of elders, and they became like the head elder of a given church. And then eventually that power kind of like solidified more and more and more over time. You could actually make a case from Doctrine of Development that the development like that was supposed to happen, but the Catholics would not agree with that, because the Catholics would say, no, Peter was the head, right from the very beginning. So therefore, there was a head right from the very beginning of the church at Rome. But anyway, really, really good kind of academic work on the topic. I reference it here and there. This whole section, a bunch of Michael Heiser books. So I really like Michael Heiser because of his work on the supernatural. But he had, brief insights on mastering Bible doctrine, 80 insights. It's just kind of a question and answer format about random topics that Heiser has written on. This one's like, it's interesting. Not something you have to get for sure. What Does God Want by Michael Heiser. I actually think this is a fantastic book, especially writing for it's basically literally answering that question. Like, if you're talking to someone about Christianity and, the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the whole point of Christianity, this is actually a really, really well laid out book where it breaks it down to its most simple components, right? Heiser has said before in his talks where it's like, okay, if this whole thing about the divine council and the Tower of Babel and splitting up people and putting watchers over the different nations, okay, so what's the point today? Well, Heiser would say the point is that the original creator God wants you back. He wants you back on his in his family, right? And that's the goal. And it's like, I love this book because it's like so simple in that regard. Like, what does God actually want? Because there's so many like New Age or vaguely spiritual people, right? And as soon as you start talking about, hey, actually these other gods are actually real, then the spiritually minded person is like, oh, okay, I can get on board with this. Let me hear more. All right, what does he want? And then supernatural is the natural progression from what does God want, where it's like, okay, this is the basic outline. How do I learn more about Heiser's thoughts on this matter, right? With the divine council, the watchers, the Nephilim, etc. And then I think, Supernatural being a very like popular level book that's understandable. And then Reversing Hermann, which is about, this is kind of like Heiser's book on the work of Christ and his view of the atonement. Now, this is another pop level book, which I would say is like good to follow after Supernatural. It's really interesting because a lot of Heiser's work can be read in a very ecumenical way, where, for example, it's almost like in his view of the atonement, Jesus didn't as much pay the price for your individual sins as he did, destroy the power of sin over humanity and correct the errors of the Watchers and the Nephilim and all this stuff, which can be read in a more like N.T. Wright kind of Catholic Orthodox manner, actually. And then likewise with the whole concept of the Watchers and things like that, it really, in the Divine Council, it really introduces a divine chain of being, like Saint Dionysus, the chain of being, and the whole concept of like, Christians are actually meant to become like the new members of the Divine Council and be above the angels like the Watchers used to be, which seems like inherently it would merit some kind of reverence for believers on earth, for example. So there's kind of an implicit support of the communion of saints and kind of revering them as well. Anyway, I could go on for ages about this, but The Unseen Realm and Angels are his more academic works. Both of them can be quite dry, but the material is very good in there. You don't necessarily have to agree with everything, but like it's really good reference material. I just referenced The Unseen Realm recently when I was interested in figuring out which was correct about Genesis 6, the Sethite hypothesis or the angel breeding with human hypothesis. And there's good material in there about that. Angels likewise has good material, but more for an academic reference. Now, here's some interesting books here. So The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz. This is revised with 2 essays from Michael Martin. This is a very classic Rosicrucian text. And Michael Martin, in his essays, for example, in this book, he puts together a lot of, and he has like commentary and stuff as well. But the Rosicrucians were kind of cool. They were mostly like Lutherans and stuff. Yeah, like he has notes at the bottom. But what Michael Martin has done is he's really gotten back to the heart of the original text and a lot of the humor of the original text, where in a lot of ways the author, I forget his name, but the author was kind of poking fun at this whole Hermetic, esoteric, mystical tradition. He's really kind of making fun of it, and there's a lot of humor in it, but a lot of people miss that, and they try to treat this book as if it is some literal, like, secret esoteric text. But at the heart of it, the whole point of The Chemical Wedding is is the theurgy concept of the divine uniting with the human, right? Infinity uniting with the finite. And that's the chemical wedding, right? And there's a lot of wedding imagery in the Bible as well. Some wedding parables and things like that. And, the whole thing with the bride of Christ being the church, there's like a mystical union there. So that's where the whole imagery of the chemical wedding comes from. Really interesting book there. Hegel and the Hermetic tradition. This is really, really cool. It basically presents a theory that Hegel was deeply influenced by Hermetic thought, and this is another one that I got from a friend. I'm trying to see, there was a really nice summary page at the end. I'm trying to find where that might be here. You can pause this if you want to read any of it. But yeah, I think it presents a really good case that he was influenced by Kabbalism and Hermeticism, and certainly what's his face? Not Leibniz, but the other guy. Lots of philosophers of the time were. Seems like some of the most creative people in this era were influenced by the occult. And that goes back to Newton, for example. Here's a real gem. Can We Still Believe in the Rapture? By Ed Hinson and Mark Hitchcock. And I actually do mean that it's a gem, honestly. I got this book on a whim because I saw this on the guy was being interviewed on some YouTube channel that I was following, and honestly, this book was really refreshing to me because for the longest time I had just kind of rejected the whole concept of the rapture as like, oh, that's some like stupid evangelical fundy garbage, it's like the people that believe in the rapture are sending money to Israel, every single month and whatnot. But the book is very sober. It actually just answers the question very plainly, can we still believe in the rapture? Because they notice that it's gone out of style, so to speak, but that it's really throwing the baby out with the bathwater. One thing that I didn't even realize when I was reading this book is that basically every view of eschatology does believe in some kind of a rapture. So even if you're a post-millennialist, for example, you still believe in a rapture. It's just a question of when it happens, how it happens, right? So, yeah, interesting book. Here's my Oswald Chambers collection. Biblical Psychology, I've done a couple videos on this one. If You Will Ask, Reflections on the Power of Prayer. This is decent. Some of the Chambers material tends to repeat a bit. For example, in the Christian Disciplines, there's a section about prayer in here, and it's kind of similar to that one. Biblical Ethics is really, really good. I really, really love Oswald Chambers, but one of the things that I find frustrating is that you will come across a topic. Biblical psychology is actually pretty holistic, but you'll come across a topic in these other ones where you're like, yes, this is like so interesting, but then he just mentions it in passing and like never really expounds upon it. So he's definitely not good if you're looking to dive deep into a particular topic, right? But really good in general. This one in particular, Biblical Ethics, I liked, but honestly, I might recommend like an ethics book from like John Frame or Dietrich von Hildebrand instead. War on the Saints. I picked this up because I was talking to a friend that is kind of a Pentecostal kind of guy, and it looked really interesting to me. This was like his favorite book on spiritual warfare, and this one is. It actually is very interesting because I'm pretty removed from the whole Pentecostal tradition. This is like very revival focused, but the material covered in here. I'll go to the table of contents. It's quite outstanding, especially considering that this group of people pretty much had no interaction with the church fathers at all. But they talk really in depth about. I thought it would break down more than that in the table of context, but they talk really in depth about like the soul and the spirit and like watchfulness and emptying the mind and how to do all these things in great depth. And it honestly reminded me of something like the Philokalia, you know, a lot of the Eastern monastics and things like that. It's very focused on synergy and cooperation with the spirit and, you know, all of these things. Counterfeit inward drawings. Yeah, this is another big thing that this book touches on is the concept of spiritual deception, which is really cool. Basically, these Pentecostals got a lot of experience in this area, like very quickly. It was literally a, you know, trial by fire kind of thing because they were doing all these revivals. Yeah, in this book, I didn't really find anything that the Catholics and the Orthodox would disagree with either. It's a very ecumenical kind of book, and they didn't even realize it. God of the Possible, I briefly mentioned this in my Open Theism Reflections, Greg Boyd. Same thing with The Suffering of God. Terence Frothheim is kind of one of those more liberal theologians, Passibility of God, but he makes really good points in this. A.W. Tozer, one of the best spiritual writers. This collection of essays, it's just book one, but it's got some absolute classics. The Saint Walks Alone, Following Hard After God. Let me see what's in here. Yeah, excerpts from like his main books. The Pursuit of God is his most popular for sure. But honestly, I think this collection of writings is probably going to get you more mileage. How to Be Filled with the Holy Spirit. It's kind of like that Eastern Orthodox book about I think it's Saint Seraphim of Sarov on the acquisition of the Holy Spirit. Very, very similar stuff in A.W. Tozer. Just really, really good. Highly recommend Tozer. Dallas Willard. I mentioned this when I was talking about For the Life of the World, that Orthodox book. I actually have it. Yeah. By Schmemann here. I think that The Divine Conspiracy is actually kind of a better book that touches on the same material. I would actually say that you should look up, though, Dallas Willard's free online lectures. I'll see if I can find the link for you guys, because there's a lot of free material from Willard that you can listen and watch that's organized. I have a couple of books on miracles and crazy things that are happening, that happened with like people in like missionaries in Asia and stuff like that. Evidence Not Seen. I picked this up on a whim, and then Dragon Ride, same. I was just like, you know what? I want to read about like what it's like to be a missionary, especially in China. I haven't read this yet, but I'm really, really looking forward to it. Just because for a period of time, I was like really interested in the Chinese underground church kind of thing. These two books kind of go hand in hand. Wild at Heart is a really popular one. What happened was I got this book, The Man's Soul, right? It's like, what were men created for, blah, blah, blah. I got this book on a whim because it was really popular on Amazon, and I told my friend about it, and he was like, actually, I think this book just tells men what they want to hear. This is probably a better book, and this is like some ancient random thing. Becoming Men of Courage in a World of Chaos. I think I haven't read either of these yet, but I think the point of this one is that the whole issue in the garden happened because he allowed Eve to take the lead, and he never said anything. He just kind of let it happen, and that's where it says like Men of Courage and all this stuff. Why won't that focus? There we go. Cool. Then this one, Eugene Peterson, the church I was going to for a while, one of them, was just like, they just like sold this book, at cost basically. I picked it up, but like, honestly, I really struggled to get into this book. I didn't really understand what the point of it was. I suspect that that's kind of the issue with Eugene Peterson a lot of the time. It's like, I don't get it. And then this one is, I can't even remember why I got this. I think I might have got it when I got Run with the Horses. Maybe because I got this on Amazon, then I bought this because it was advertised as well, and I was like, ooh, married book and Eugene Peterson, okay, why not? This is bizarre, though. Like, this is from a very liberal, progressive woman, and she's writing her reflections on marriage, and she's like an egalitarian, and she's in favor of same-sex marriage and stuff. But when I was reading this book, it's actually kind of interesting because it's not written for conservative or traditional minded people. It's actually written for progressive liberal people, because a lot of the things that she doesn't make arguments for her case. A lot of it is like her thoughts on traditional views, and she's speaking to other progressives. For example, what does she say here? Gosh, I can't get this to focus. I'm very glad that people are no longer shunned for shacking up. I suspect I might actually believe that sex is for married people. You know, it's that kind of thing. It's like, hey, what if the conservatives are a little bit correct? And I pointed out V2 Catholics because they often do this thing where it's like, you know, they have the right idea, but it's in the wrong context, you know, so then they'll be accepting of people that are playing house because it's the right idea. So it's like morality by baby steps. That's very much a V2 thing, Vatican II thing. Let's see. Oh, and this section is talking about gay celibacy, and she's like, let's see, yeah, surely the answer is not to shun friendship as a gateway, blah, blah. So like, for example, she's like open to the concept of gay celibacy, and she relates it to her own relationships, where she's like, I choose to remain with my husband, you know, I choose fidelity, and that's kind of like a gay person choosing celibacy or something like that, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of a bizarre book. And then there's one more thing I highlighted in here. Let's see. Yeah. I believe that as Christians, we must take the Bible seriously, not literally, mind you, but seriously. Yeah, so she's like, you know, don't totally ignore what Paul is saying, but, you know, take it into account. I think that she would very much like the whole theology of the body material. I think most progressive Christians would like the theology of the body stuff, that especially the stuff that Matthew West has written about, because it is very, I feel like most of that theology of the body stuff is written for modern liberal people. She makes a lot of the exact same points that John Paul II makes, actually, regarding like male and female relations. Anyway, this was not that bad of a book. I mean, she still, as far as I know, she still believes in like same-sex marriage and all of this stuff, but it's very much honest reflections. Anyway, I don't know why I talked about that book of all for so long. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what you think. Bye.